On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences. And I'm so glad today to have my guest today come back. My guest today is Ross Jackson, and he actually has written 2 books about patient recruitment and is returning to tell us about his new patient recruitment book. Ross is a specialist in patient recruitment for clinical trials, having helped deliver many thousands of patient registrations for clients in the UK, Europe, and the US. And so with that, welcome, Ross. Welcome back.
Hi, Don. Thank you for having me back. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And so for those of the listeners that might not have met you in the last episode, would you mind just taking a moment and telling everyone just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, no problem. So I'm in England. I'm living in Manchester in England at the moment. And I started off in 1998 actually doing digital marketing. One of my first clients back then was actually a doctor. So I actually started off recruiting patients for his potential new treatment that he developed. And then I thought, this is quite interesting. So I developed a bit more into healthcare, got more healthcare clients. Running in parallel, I was still running other things as well for a few years, but then eventually the healthcare bit took over. I got some work through agencies for clinical trial recruitment, and I thought, okay, this is good. I like doing this. It's it's giving something back. It's helping the world of clinical research. It's helping the world in general, and it's also something I can do. So then I started to focus on that. Went through all digital stuff, digital marketing, Facebook ads, those kind of things. When they first came out, actually, I was one of the first people to do Facebook ads for patient recruitment. And then, having worked on so many trials, I just expanded into general patient recruitment activities and consultancy and advice for, recruiting patients into trials for basically for sponsors, for CROs, for sites, and also over the last probably 5 years, also developed a bit more in terms of advising companies who want to get into the industry. So for their positioning and marketing purposes. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I remember, very vividly our first interview, just talking about exactly how you got into this. And it's interesting to me, sort of the journey that we all take from a career perspective. What did you study in college? What was, kind of your background prior to all of this?
I went for a degree in philosophy actually,
Ah,
uh, which which was very interesting. I still like to use those kind of concepts. I like to think things through. I like the idea of logic in particular was one I like, but also I like just general philosophical concepts.
yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense as well. So why is patient recruitment such a big challenge in the clinical trials industry?
Yeah, it's one of those things that has been puzzling people for years, isn't it? It's always been a big problem, and it still hasn't been solved. So I would say there's 2 main factors that make it an issue. Awareness is one of them. This is basically people aren't aware that clinical trials exist. I think in general, the population doesn't know that there are clinical trials. Realistically, we, as an industry, we missed a trick a few years ago because the whole world was aware that there was a clinical trial for COVID vaccines. But that did not parlay into people realizing, oh, maybe there's a clinical trial somewhere for something else that I might be interested in. So awareness of trials is a real tricky one that people just don't know that they are available. Another side of awareness is that I think we probably all experience this within the industry, trying to explain to people what you do, people who don't know, and they don't get it, or the phrase guinea pig often comes up and says, "Oh,
Oh,
so you're especially in patient recruitment, so you're recruiting guinea pigs." I'll see. Okay, and this is another thing about the awareness. People are not aware of how important clinical research is for developing new treatments, life-enhancing and life-saving treatments. So they sort of view it, either they don't know about it at all and they're not looking for it, or they just view it a bit disparagingly. The other side of it, aside from awareness, I would say that the other big issue, there's plenty of issues, but the two big ones, awareness and access. The access side of it comes down to a few things as well. Clinical trial eligibility criteria, the protocols that people put together for inclusion exclusion criteria, are often so strict that realistically the sponsor is looking for super beings who have no
mm,
comorbidities or anything at all, people who actually don't exist. So the eligibility criteria does actually limit the access for people. I know there are reasons for it, but we'll perhaps come on to this a little bit later, how you might be able to change some of those things. And the other one is just access to the trial itself. The majority of trials are still run in the traditional format, where you go to a research site and you do, all the trial operations are administered there. You have to attend several visits throughout the period of the trial, and it's just difficult if you don't live near to a site, within easy traveling distance. You don't have access to it. If you can't get time off work, the sites are not always open at convenient times. You have to go there. You spend a lot of your own time. You don't get paid often, or it's not very much. So there's a big problem there of people with access to it, which is why I think often you end up with the same type of people attending trials, older people who perhaps have more time and more spare resource who can do it.
mm. Yeah, it is interesting to me because oftentimes we talk as well about just having general access to to a clinical trial, but I mean the idea of awareness, starting with just general awareness of the clinical trial, seems like a very big issue. And then
Mm.
once you have people on the clinical trial, is that another major issue that just keeping people involved as well in the clinical trial itself?
Yeah, I would say that the two biggest problems facing clinical trials in general are recruiting patients and retaining them. So keeping people on the trial, retention of patients is probably the second biggest problem facing the industry in some respects at least. And I think the main factor there is the burden of
Mm,
participation. So, as I've said, most trials are still the traditional format, so you have to attend the research site. Now, that's tricky. It can be difficult to get the time to do it. You might have to be traveling for ages. Sometimes you're away for the whole day just to go. It's a burden when you get there. Blood draws, all sorts of things like that happen, and most of these people are patients, so they actually are living with a particular condition anyway. So on top of the condition they're living with, they then have this extra burden. You may be fatigued and not want to attend the actual site trial visit one particular day. The expense of it, you may not, you might get expenses to cover it. In fact, you probably will, but again, that's not always an easy process. I know some trials will put you up in a hotel and et cetera. But do people really want to do that? Some people will, but not everyone. So that's an issue. I think that the burden of participation is the primary problem with retaining patients. There are obviously reasons, people drop out of trials for very normal reasons, and people should be allowed to drop out of trials. But we should be doing as much as we can to make it as easy as possible for people to stay in the trials. Treating them with respect is another factor here. Just when people come in, they are giving of their time, their physiology to try and make this trial, at least the trial a success, maybe the treatment a success. So they should be treated with respect as the key people within the process.
mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's very very important, as well. And are there other potential solutions in terms of delivering better results?
Yeah, I think that there are. I mean, there's not one, there's no magic bullet, but there's plenty of things together. that can happen. I think I mentioned the sort of access thing based on eligibility criteria. So what can happen a lot is if someone's doing a trial for a particular therapy area, they will look at previous trials and just simply copy and paste the eligibility criteria without necessarily understanding if it makes sense for all these things. I've worked on plenty of type 2 diabetes trials where, they need a very low BMI, and it's almost self-defeating in one respect. You're thinking, right, okay, all the people who you want will not qualify on this particular criterion. So yeah, I think that's certainly one thing that can be done. Make it easier for people to get access should they wish to. In terms of another thing about access is not having it hosted at the research site necessarily. I know DCT, decentralized trials, was the massive buzzword at the start of the pandemic, and it started before that, obviously, but became much more prevalent a few years ago, and it's died down a bit now. But I think the buzz has, at least. The reason for that is that people were so focused on the tech enablement side of DCTs, like all these wearables and all those kind of things. Whereas realistically, decentralized trials, it's a concept. It's basically about being able to administer a trial without it having to be centered on the research site. And that's all it means. You don't have to have tech for that. You can have nurse visits, mobile research sites, all those kind of things. So that I think a lot of these things have been adopted by the industry. So even though the buzz isn't there, people talking about decentralized trials, the actual concept has permeated through. And these are very helpful things that can help people with access to it. The awareness side of things, it's often when I talk to people about what I'm doing, it's always, don't doctors put people forward for trials? No, it's the simple answer to that. Some do, but not very many. So, general practitioners or, primary care physicians, you would anticipate they would be a very good source of patients for trials. They have the relationship already. They can find out, does the person qualify? They have access to the records, and they could suggest, oh, here's a trial you might want to take part in. There are plenty of reasons why that is difficult. Short length of time allocated to each visit. The doctor needs to be aware of the trial. There are issues there, but if we could get more doctors involved in clinical research and actually believing it's a good thing, not all of them do, of course, but certainly I think a lot of them would if we could persuade them that it was useful. Get more doctors involved, that would increase awareness. I still work on plenty of trials where, well, I don't work on them particularly, but I come across them at the start of when I start working on them, that are not doing anything in terms of digital outreach. And in the 21st century, it makes no sense at all not to have some sort of web presence for the trial. There are lots of other things involved, rare diseases, but getting that awareness through doctors, through the internet, through community groups, through patient groups, these are things that will help to make people understand, there are trials I can participate in. It's a good thing to participate in trials. And actually, I do qualify because the access criteria is not that bad, the eligibility criteria. So I think these are the things we should be focusing on to try and get more people participating in research.
Very good. So maybe we should start by going back first in terms of your first book, and then we could talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the second book and why now. But in terms of the first book, can you tell people just a little bit about, what your first book was about and, how it kind of came about as well?
Called patient recruitment for clinical trials using Facebook ads. So it does exactly what it says. It's I'd been working with Facebook ads to recruit patients to promote clinical trials for several years, and I realized there was no book around about it. I also realized that the majority of trials were not using this digital outreach method, and actually it was very successful. I think of the organizations that do digital outreach through advertising, Facebook is probably even still at least 50, 60, sometimes 70+% in terms of the number of patients they recruit. So a lot of people were not using this, didn't know that you could. I still come across people who say, oh, you mean you can advertise on Facebook and target by location? So I was just trying to put all those thoughts down into a book that was easy to access. People could read it and research sites if they had a bit of a budget. They could say, right, well, I can do this myself. And other people within the industry, just to make them aware that it was a useful thing to be doing, a very valuable and valid source of potential patients for trials. And yeah, I put it together, put it out there. It's still the only one, as far as I know, that focuses on Facebook ads in particular. And yeah, every trial I work on, it's often a big element to have Facebook advertising involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important thing, and whether you're recruiting, um, a specific targeted audience, or you're recruiting, across a certain age group, or individuals that do certain things. Um, all of those things can be filtered inside of Facebook, which has an amazing amount of data about what we do, and what
Yeah.
sort of things that we constantly talk about. So it is a great tool from that standpoint. So in terms of the current book,
For sure. And I think yeah, yeah.
go ahead. No, please, please.
I was going to say, I think the other thing that's happening with Facebook, of course, is it's going to get easier and easier to use it for people who just want to, with the use of AI, which is going to come in even more, artificial intelligence, being able to actually prompt Facebook to say, right, I am looking for this type of people to qualify for a clinical trial. Facebook will then be able to interpret that and spit it out back to you, saying, right, these are the type of ads that have been successful in the past. It's not happening tomorrow, and it's not happening, probably not exactly like that in the next year or two, but that is the direction of travel, and that will make it easier, but also more effective for recruiting patients.
Won't it be interesting? I mean, so from that standpoint, won't it be interesting to be able to say, I need a diverse clinical trial population, right? And um, hopefully the AI would understand without some of our human biases, and
Yeah,
and be able to
I,
provide
I,
you a very
I
clear
agree.
population. Yeah.
Yeah, no, indeed, and that's one of the great advantages. I'm really looking forward to this happening, really, because it's a way for without these inherent biases that we might all have, the AI will just understand it and think, right, okay, well, this is what I'm doing, and the data, as you said there, the amount of data that Facebook has is it's more than any group of 1 million people put together could come up with. So they then being able to interpret what you want based on their historical records of what actually happens, who the people are, put these things together. It's it should be very, very effective. It's already very effective. Should be even more effective.
Right. Right. So tell us about your new book. Why did you write this book, and
Yeah,
why now?
sure. So well, since I've put the first one together, I was thinking even then it's about 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe even more. 4 years ago, I think. I thought, okay, well, what I want to do, because Facebook ads was where I'd started to an extent, the digital marketing element. So I thought, right, I'll put that book out there. 'Cause there isn't one. But I'd also moved a lot more into just general patient recruitment activities. So I thought, right, this is what I want to put together now. It's a book about the landscape of patient recruitment. So looking at the stakeholders, what the problems are, putting forward some potential solutions. So I did start to write it maybe 2 years ago. I put down thoughts and stuff, and then, as often happens, got busy with things, and I came back to it last year. I thought, right, now this year I'm definitely going to finish this book, and I came up with a title, which was the Patient Recruitment Conundrum. And when I'd come up with that title, I thought, that sounds like a thriller novel. Sounds like the sort of thing you might find at the bookstore, like someone's written, here's the latest thriller by Robert Ludlum or whatever. So I thought, that's an interesting idea. So I then started to play around with writing the stuff I'd put together in a fictional way, and it just carried on like that. So the book is actually it's a fictionalized overview of the landscape of patient recruitment, featuring the central character is called Josh Black, who is a puzzle solver, and he is recruited to solve the puzzle of patient recruitment, the patient recruitment conundrum. He works through all the bases, so it covers all the different stakeholders, everything involved, looks at all the problems. There's a series of conversations with different people to find out what the issues are. Josh has a sidekick called Max Donovan, who I brought in, and I thought, okay, this is another way to bounce ideas around and get it out there so that people might understand it a bit. And yeah, I released it at the end of towards the end of last year, September, I think it was. And lots of people, I had advice from other people. I've got some feedback from people in the industry about various sections to make sure I was not saying anything stupid, or this couldn't possibly happen in that way. And I got it all together, and people have been very favourable, reacted very favourably towards it. I've been told many times that it's a great way to get the learning across in a way that is not like a dry textbook. People will follow the story, and then the ideas seep in, and they understand it. And yeah, so I'm very pleased with the way it's come across. Yeah.
It's got to be I've always wondered how stories are written, right? Because whenever you have characters and they sort of interweave throughout
Yeah.
the story, I mean, it's not something that I could see myself, writing at any point in time, because keeping track of characters and the storyline and all of that is not something that I feel like I would be very good at. But I do enjoy, obviously, a good story as well. Was it a
Yeah, well,
challenge to write
I
from that
like to write.
aspect?
Well, it was to an extent. I mean, I like to write fiction anyway, so it's a hobby of mine, writing stories. So I thought that's quite interesting. I'll combine these two things, and it was a challenge, especially it could just have been a load of information put forward, and you could just say, "So, Josh, tell me about this," and someone says, "Blah blah 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 blah." So I thought, let's try and make it a bit more interesting. So I tried to vary the settings and get the questions backwards and forwards, and actually, people interjecting with different thoughts, maybe querying what's just been said. So, and also, it's set in. They travel from London to, I think, Las Vegas and back. So there's a few different things in there. I thought, as it's a thriller, we may as well try and get it a bit James Bond like. I actually called my character Josh Black because James Bond, or Jason Bourne, or Jack Bauer. But anyway, so I thought, yeah, it was a challenge to do it, but because I've done it a few times where I've read lots of books about writing stories as well, and so I thought, right, okay, let me use that knowledge that I've got about writing fiction, try and put it in here, and get it all to work together. And as the story developed, different elements came up. And I thought, oh, that's taking it in a slightly different direction, so I can write something else about this. So it was fun to do. But yeah, it probably took a bit longer than it would have done had I just written it as a textbook, because I could have just got research sites, CROs, etc., etc. But yeah, it was more fun writing it the way I did.
And I would ask this of anybody that's a fiction author, because I feel like each one of the authors have to, in some way, weave their own personality into things. So, are you more like Josh Black, or are you more like Max Donovan?
Oh, yeah, I think that's a fair point. If anyone who creates characters is probably putting an element of themselves into each one. There's actually a character in the book called Ross Johnson, who I just put in as a joke, as like my Ross Jackson. So, but he's a British patient recruitment specialist. But yeah, so I think Max is American, Josh is British, so perhaps I'm more like Josh in that way. And I think Josh is a bit more of a thinker and uses a bit more logic, so perhaps from my philosophy background. So I'd say there's certainly an element of me in both, but I'm perhaps a bit more towards the Josh side of things. Yeah.
Very good. So there are a few questions that I want to ask you, and some of them you've answered before. So the first one is, what is the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
Yeah, leadership advice. Okay. So I think for me, what's good about leadership is taking your ego out of it. It's been difficult, I think, for me to learn that over the years, but think I have learned it now, especially as a consultant advisor. It's always about, well, here's my idea, here's my idea. What I've realized over 20 years or so is actually, yeah, you can nudge people along, but you're better off creating an environment where they come up with good ideas. I mean, they may come up with the same idea, or that you may be able to nudge them into the idea that you want them to head for. But you don't want to be saying, "Oh, that's my idea." It's not like your own ego trip. It is about helping the end result. And sometimes the end result comes about because someone has a better idea. So if
Hmm.
you foster that environment where people can put forward their own ideas and think about things and bounce ideas back, especially with the leader or with the consultant, that's usually going to deliver the better results than simply going in saying, right, this is my idea, and then I think in the early days of my career, I would probably get a little bit frustrated that I wasn't being recognised for having had the idea in the first place. But I've come to realise that that doesn't matter at all. What really
Hmm.
matters is that the end result is better for you having been in it. And I think that the leadership part there is about stepping back and allowing other people to do good work.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I was just working with a team yesterday, and one of the things that I had said to them at dinner last night was the same thing. It was, I can't wait to see, what you do with this next, right? So have
Yeah,
them take the idea and kind of continue it forward. Is something that I, enjoy as well, because it's almost like an acknowledgement of just the things that have been shared and things like that. So
yeah,
yeah, very valuable. So I've asked you these three questions before, but I think it's important to come back and see if there's anything that's new from your perspective. The first question: what inspires you?
yeah. Inspires me. Okay, so I think I'm thinking of two different areas here. So in the industry, the things that inspire me are the people like yourself and others, the people who do great work, the people who are dedicated to actually achieving new treatments, new life-saving, life-enhancing treatments. The people who like dedicate their lives and their time, and actually really committed to making sure things go well. I think outside of the industry, there's an opinion that it's all profiteering. Big pharma is terrible. All they want to do is they profit from people's misery. I've never met anyone like that within the industry at all. Um, Everybody I know in the industry is dedicated to it. Sure, you want to make money, but what you want to really do is have people's lives be improved by what you're doing. So, and that's an inspiring thing. The people, all the fantastic, dedicated people within the industry. I think just in general, um, the sort of I'm inspired by people who continue to do great things on and on and on. I'm a big music fan, and the Rolling Stones released a new album last year, and it's widely regarded as one of their best since the 60s. And you think these guys are in their 80s and they're still creating great music. They don't need to work or anything, but they're still doing it, and it still fires them up to do it. I think, yeah, this is good. These are the people I want to take my inspiration from and continue to be like that.
Hmm, very good. Thank you for sharing that. What concerns you?
Um, okay, again, so two different aspects. So within the industry, I can't help but be concerned by, that the patient recruitment is a problem. The large number of trials that simply don't recruit enough patients to be able to prove whether the trial worked or not. Well, the trial will work, but whether the treatment works or not. So it's a big concern. The fact that so many trials are started and don't get to completion. Hopefully, over time we can change that. Well, one of the big things I try and push in the book is that the whole industry working together. If the whole industry did work together to try and, let's get all the stakeholders, the sponsor companies, pharma companies, the CROs, the research sites, everyone else involved, the patients, most particularly community groups, primary care physicians, everybody working together to try and push things forward to get the research results that we want, that would be, I think, the real way we could improve things. So it's a concern that doesn't happen. Sort of related to that, in general, I'm very concerned, as probably is everybody in the world, about this excessive polarization of opinion that has happened, probably exacerbated since COVID. Here in Manchester, there are people who do anti-vax demonstrations quite frequently, and there's all sorts of things there. I mean, it's not just vax or anti-vax, but it's just this. If you're on one side or the other, there's no middle ground. Well, there is, but there doesn't seem to be. It's not loud enough. The shouting is much louder on either side, and the middle ground seems to be forgotten. So I think it's a very bad situation, and just in general being concerned about stuff that's going on. There are wars going on all the time, and this is a concern. It happens a lot, but I think the polarization of support for these type of things makes it worse, and that's what I have a concern about that. Yeah.
Very good. And last question: what excites you?
Excites. Well, I touched on this earlier on. Actually, within the industry, I think the use of AI is going to be very interesting. So I've mentioned how it can work, AI potentially for digital marketing, but just within other aspects, just for patient recruitment. So natural language processing, which is a feature of AI where they can recognize things from notes rather than, so that in order to find a patient from a research site database, for example, you have to have standardized data. So then you can search through. Someone might take hours and hours reading through a patient's record. Have they got this? Have they got this? Are they this high? It's blah, 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 etc., etc. AI can probably do that through natural language processing just by looking at the notes. You feed the notes into it, it can say, this word is the equivalent of XYZ that we're looking for. So artificial intelligence should really be able to speed up that process. And I think, and there's plenty more opportunities for artificial intelligence to actually help clinical trials, digital twins, these kind of things. I think that there's so many things that it can help with. And they use the word artificial intelligence. I think some of it is just intelligence. I don't know. The artificial bit comes into everything that people ascribe to AI, but it is just a computer doing its job. But I do think there's plenty of other aspects that AI can help with. And in general, I think one thing I was thinking there, I'm going to the Scope Summit in Orlando in a few weeks' time. And I'm excited to be watching my first Super Bowl, which is on the Sunday evening. I've never watched it on TV. It's on really late here. So I'm thinking, okay, it'll be interesting. I'm going to have to perhaps learn something about the rules of what you call football, what we call American football, before I get there. But yeah, I'm quite excited by that because it goes on for hours, doesn't it? So it'll be quite an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I think I mean, at least in terms of the football aspect of it, I mean, it's honestly to me just the celebration and kind of the gathering of individuals to eat a lot of good junk food is a great experience. And the commercials normally, I mean, to me, I'm somebody I don't spend a lot of time watching sports, so I normally will pick a team ahead of time and then. Um, either root for one team or the other, eat a lot of junk food, and then watch the commercials because oftentimes to me they're great to kind of see as well. But yeah.
No, well, I mean, I think that's always something that comes up every year, isn't it? How much money people pay for the Super Bowl commercials, and then there's always a halftime act, isn't there? That is very a well-known person usually. So yeah, and I think there's a what they call a tailgate party. I think they've called it beforehand, and then there's going to be some kind of being able to watch it in the hotel. So it'd be interesting. I don't know if, but I might eat some junk food as well. Let's see. I think it's
All
should be
right.
fun.
Very good. Well, Ross Jackson, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast. Thank you so much for sharing, the information about your new book. And I hope that people take the time to go out and grab a copy. I did notice that it's on Amazon. I don't know if it's in other bookstores as well, but certainly, a great read to read your fictional take on clinical trials.
Thanks very much, Don. Yeah, it's on Amazon at the moment. Also, if you go to patientrecruitmentbook.com, you get to a page on my website, and they'll forward you to Amazon as well. So thanks very much.
Very good. All right. Thanks. Have a great week.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.